Assalamu alaikum. This is your teacher Anam Kantri, and we are starting a series of different lectures regarding the paper 2 of the computer science course 2210. So the first topic that we are going to dwell in today is the program development life cycle. From the topic life cycle, I know you must be really familiar with it. From what we learn in science, life cycle is basically how the growth of an organism takes place, or how something is evolved from a very small unit to a bigger unit. So in a similar way, in computer science, the life cycle involves a series of structure, a series of steps, or the series of activities that are followed to produce a system. This system can be a hardware system, or it can be creating a new software program. And as you can see from the diagram, this is basically cyclic in nature. By cycling, what I mean is that it is going into a series and coming back to the original process again. So in a similar way, when we create a program or when we create a system in computer science, we go through all these steps one after another until we are pretty sure that whatever we have built is into a structure that can be used easily. But then life goes on and the system has to be amended, the system has to be changed or updated from time to time. And for that, again, you have to go through the same series of processes. The first step of program development lifecycle is the analysis stage. Another name for the analysis stage is the requirement specification of the program, in which you actually sit down with the client, try to comprehend their requirements, their requisitions regarding the program that they want. So you are actually focusing this is the process in which you actually focus on the requirements from the client's perspective. Here the client can be any organization or the end user, but it is very important to allocate time to this, without which, without whose understanding, the entire process can become endless, full of repetitions and full of corrections. So in doing this, in going through this analysis stage, you actually are working on two other processes. That is the abstraction of the program or the abstraction of the client perspective and the decomposition of that perspective. From the abstraction, it means to keep the key element requirement for the solution to the problem and discard any unnecessary details and information. For example, when you first start thinking about a road trip, you don't care about the specific tire pressure or the exact brand of mustard in your sandwiches. You focus on the high level data and processes. For example, what destination do you want to move to? What should be the budget? How many are the total number of travelers? What should be the dates? What is the weather forecast in those days? This is the essential details that you need to focus on before you start a road trip. So this is known as the abstraction. Once you have done the abstraction from the perspective of from the requisition perspective, now you move on to the next stage of the analysis, within the analysis stage, and that is the decomposition part, in which you break down a complex problem into some smaller problems, and these smaller problems are furthermore broken down into more simpler problems so that the problem can be solved easily. Take the same example of the road trip, which is too big to handle as one single task. If you try to do the road trip all at once, you'll miss something. Instead, you break it down into functional modules. For example, if the module A is working on the logistics, so in that, under those logistics, you try to check the car oils, you map out the primary route and the backups, and you book the hotels and the campsites. In the module B, you work on the sustenance of the road trip. means the calculation for the food requirement for the number of days that were planned, or to identify the gas stations along the route. Then the third module is to focus on the entertainment because you are going on a road trip. So you try to download all the offline maps. So once you reach the site, you know where to go forward to. You create your own driving playlist that you can play. You work on the games that you will play there to entertain yourself, and the other activities you thought you want to focus on to. So you have the decomposition ready into modules, and those further into further modules. Let's make your abstraction part of the analysis stage a little more simple. What if a person wished to make a cup of tea? What do he need? Basically, that person needs a tea bag together with some milk, maybe a glass of milk or a jug of milk, depending upon how many people they want to address to. Then some sugar, and then ultimately the crockery that you need, a good number of mugs and a kettle. Now that you have abstracted all the key elements to make a tea, you now decompose your abstract into many simpler processes. Process of heating, process of pouring, and the process of serving. This process of heating is furthermore divided into at which temperature the water will be heated and what quantity of water will be heated. So you are basically decomposing the abstract into the heating process and furthermore into the temperature and the amount of the water. Then when you move on to the pouring part, you first focus on pouring the tea bag and the sugar inside the mug. And the second decomposition of the pouring is to pour in boiled water into that added material. Once you have gone through the pouring stage, the pouring decomposition part, then you move on to the third one, in which you are ready to serve. And in serving also, you need to stir and serve, or you can serve and the person can stir. So either of them is, these three steps are furthermore decomposed into multiple steps on its own to make the process easier for the user. Now that the stage one of analysis is complete, we move on to the second one, which is the design stage. In the design stage, the decomposition phase is actually continued, not in the form of the analysis part, but in the form that once you have the decomposed analysis ready, it's now time to draw up the visuals in the form of structure diagrams, in the form of flow charts and algorithms and pseudocodes. So you basically work on the decomposed part or on the simpler material to define it into visuals, to convert it into visuals or to design it into visuals so that it becomes not only visuals but into textual part as well in the form of algorithms and pseudocodes, so that there is a proper structure that stands there signifying which process will lead to the next one. The decomposed component parts that we got from the analysis stage are basically composed of inputs, that is the data used by the system that needs to be entered while the system is active. Means the requirements or the objects or the tasks that are input to carry out the process. And the next step of the decomposed component is the process, that is the task that need to be performed using the input data and any other previously stored data. Then the outputs, which include the information that needs to be displayed or printed for the users of the system. And the last but not the least, once the output is there, then if need be, then the data can be stored as well in the form of files or in the form of proper medium for use in the future. The different components that we now have achieved through by the analysis stage are furthermore divided into the form of a hierarchical diagram that shows the decomposition of the system and help to visualize the end goal. And this is our structure diagram. Let's take the example of making the tea that we discussed earlier. What do we need in making the tea? Water, combine, personalize, and serve. So these are the four processes that the tea making has to go through to make a final mug of tea. Talking about the pseudocodes, when we talk about the pseudocodes, that is in the second stage, that is the design stage of the program development lifecycle, it basically enables the complex problems and instructions to be read in plain English. These complex problems are not decomposed into simpler ones, but still they need to be addressed in plain English for the user to understand. Excellent way to check that the instructions make sense prior to the coding process. We will go with the same example of tea making, in which the first step is to pour the water into the kettle, plug the kettle in, switch the plug on at the wall, turn the kettle on, check to see if the water is boiling. If the water isn't boiling, check the electricity. If the water is boiling, wait for a number of seconds. If the water has not yet reached boiling point, keep waiting. If the water has reached boiling point, turn off the kettle, pour the water into the mug, which consists of the tea bags. That was the flowchart one, that was written the task in plain English. The next part is how to present your decomposed version or a simpler version in the form pictorially in the form of flowcharts. So this is the pictorial representation of the program execution. As you can see, this involves a series of different shapes, and each shape is signifying a different type of a process. So basically, flowchart is a combination of different shapes. Each of the shape has its own way of expressing itself, expressing the process that it goes through, expressing the inputs, the outputs, and the storage. That will be dealt in detail in our coming lectures. Now that the stage 2 of designing is complete, we move on to the stage 3, which is coding and iterative testing. Coding, the other name for coding is the implementation stage. Now that the design is ready, the pictorial form of the design is ready, the plain English form of the design is ready, the structured form of the design is ready. Now, this is the stage where the real implementation of the program takes place. The programmers work on the different design modules that are given to them. This programming is linked together as a complete solution, means different modules are made as shown in the structure diagrams. The different modules are made by different groups or different people. And once those separate modules are made in the form of coding using any programming language, because in coding we use programming language, these modules are then linked together to form the major program. Once the major program is made, and even before making the major program, once they are in the module stage, then they are constantly tested with different types of data. That is known as the iterative testing. The word iterative means repeated testing. So each of the module is repeatedly tested by the programmers using different forms of data, so that the module in itself can be refined in simplified form first before they can combine with the other modules and be a part of a bigger structure. Once all the modules are made and they are combined as a bigger structure, we move on to the stage 4, which is the testing stage, in which the entire system is divided into small sections that are tested for input, output, and validation rules. So once all the modules are combined together to form a bigger program, now is the time that they are tested together in smaller sections. First, the input part is tested, then the output part is tested, and the validation part is tested. Validation would be dealt in details in the coming program. But right now, for your ease, validation means to test that the data that the client wanted to focus on, is your program really focused on working correctly with that data or not. So that for this purpose, test data is used for all the tests to be carried out, and testing of each part of the code individually is known as the unit testing, where integration testing is used when this code is all combined to form a program. The testing team reports any errors to the programmers, and the testing is repeated until there are no errors found in the system. So this is basically used for the quality assurance of that program. That is a part of the stage 4 testing, or that is a result of the stage 4 of the program development life cycle, that is the testing stage. To sum up, program development lifecycle is divided into 4 stages. First one being the analysis stage, which is a process of investigation using abstraction and decomposition to specify what a program does. The second stage is the design stage, which uses the structure charts, the flow charts, and the pseudocodes with the program specification from analysis to show how the program should be developed. The third one is the coding stage, which is writing and iterative testing of the program or the suite of programs or the different modules. And the fourth stage is the testing stage, which is the testing of the completed program to ensure that it works under all conditions. Let's work on a sample question taken from the revision guide of our course book, Computer Science 2210, O-Level and IGCSE. The question goes like, program development lifecycle is divided into different stages. Analysis is the first stage. Part A is describe the purpose of analysis. Now the keyword here is describe. Describe means that only naming the purpose alone in one word will not be required. It will need a one-liner in which you'll have to state why the analysis stage is needed, not what actions are to be performed. So this low-level answer that is already presented here said that it will use interviews and questionnaires to find out what is needed. He is basically focusing on what actions are to be performed, but we are more focused on what is to be performed during this stage. So this involves to investigate the problem that requires a solution and to find out what the problem needs to do to provide that solution. And even if you want to go into further details, you can use the words, the abstract the data and decompose the data into simpler parts. That's basically what analysis is focused on. Part B asks, identify and describe 2 other stages of the program lifecycle. Now here 2 command words are used, identify and describe. So first is you identify the 2 stages, that you give the name of the 2 stages, and the second one is give a one-liner, because the command word describe is used, that will involve give a one-liner statement for each of that stage. That will complete the exact answer of the question, and that will give you the maximum marks. I hope you understood this topic well. For any queries, you can leave a comment below. I would be glad to answer you in the comments. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.